Hello, today we're going to talk about an obstetrics emergency. I've chosen to do shoulder dystocia, which is a very rare situation that you may find yourself in the pre-hospital environment. It is occurring in approximately 1 in every 300 deliveries. The definition of shoulder dystocia is essentially the anterior shoulder of the baby being delivered becomes wedged against the symphysis pubis as it comes out, and this is a particularly important situation to manage as both the morbidity rates of the unborn fetus and also complications for the mother can be quite significant, but with correct management it can be achieved and delivered quite well. If it's not managed appropriately, the baby can be at significant risk of asphyxia, poor neurological outcome, trauma associated with delivering the baby, and also a high probability or chance of morbidity for the child. So the first step in the delivery of a shoulder dystocia is firstly the identification of the shoulder dystocia. Within our guidelines, the shoulder dystocia becomes apparent when the baby's head fails to externally rotate and the head retracts up against the perineum, which is called turtle sign. The second warning sign or general indication that you may be confronted with a shoulder dystocia is a prolonged delivery between the head and the rest of the body, which is indicating the shoulder has become wedged up against the symphysis pubis. Now, in terms of the actual delivery of the baby, it is going to be a combination, it will be firstly external interventions followed by internal interventions in a specific order from least intrusive to most intrusive in order to deliver the baby, and that's what we'll run through now. Okay, so the first intervention that should be tried is called the McRoberts manoeuvre, which requires the flexion of both thighs and bending of the knees so that they are raised up against the abdomen as high as possible. Assistance might be needed to offer to the mother to achieve this position. The manoeuvre or the intervention from the paramedics is just a small downward traction to the baby's head. It is essential not to be pulling on the head, but merely just a gentle traction downwards, and this will hopefully release the anterior shoulder against the symphysis pubis and relieve the impaction that has occurred. So if the McRoberts manoeuvre has been unsuccessful after approximately 30 seconds, keeping in mind that we want to get this delivery achieved within 4 minutes, so you can only spend a short amount of time on each manoeuvre before moving on to the next. The next is called the Rubens type 1, which is a suprapubic pressure manoeuvre. This is ideally achieved with a second person on scene. So while you're still maintaining the slight downward pressure to the baby's head, is a very gentle pressure. A second person will provide suprapubic pressure. Ideally, it would be pressure just above the pubis, pushing in an oblique direction across the anterior scapula of the baby. Now, this is ideally with the pressure across like that. That's going to enable a slight rotation and a release of the baby and allowing for delivery. So now we're moving on to the internal manoeuvres. When all external manoeuvres have been exhausted unsuccessfully, then you move on to internal manoeuvres. The first manoeuvre that should be tried is something called the Rubens 2 manoeuvre. Now, this is a combination of external, where you're still applying suprapubic pressure in a lateral direction across the baby's back, essentially. However, a second paramedic will apply gentle traction inside the vagina against the anterior shoulder and attempt to rotate it down to relieve the impaction there and allow the delivery of the baby. Okay, so again, if the Rubens 2 is not successful, what you're going to look to do is to carry out something called a wood screw manoeuvre, which is essentially just an extension of the Rubens 2. So still fingers inside the vagina on the anterior shoulder. However, with the other hand, you're putting your fingers against the anterior shoulder of the baby, just trying to exaggerate that manoeuvre to release the impaction of the baby. Okay, so following unsuccessful delivery using the wood screw manoeuvre, you're going to carry out what's called a reverse wood screw manoeuvre, which mechanically is merely trying to, instead of rotating the baby so that it's face down, you're going to be rotating it so that its face is pointing to the anterior section of the mother's anatomy, which is merely just if it's not working one way, then you're trying to get it to work the other way. So instead of the anterior shoulder on the posterior, you go on the anterior and vice versa, and you push it around like that. Yeah. Okay, so finally the last manoeuvre which can be attempted is essentially trying to reduce the diameter of the baby's body so that it can be delivered, and that is delivering the posterior baby's arm. So to achieve that, you bend the posterior arm across the body and deliver it out so that it's over the head. So depending on which manoeuvre works, the following care of the baby post-delivery is going to be the same. So say we're performing wood screw manoeuvre that delivers the baby, immediate skin-to-skin contact with tactile stimulation, which is drawing on the baby's back, maintaining warmth and skin-to-skin contact is very important for the mother. We won't go into the resuscitation guidelines, as that's a whole another situation. But what we will look at is management of the third stage of labour. This is where we use an APGAR score, which is listed here. This should be taken at 1 and 5 minutes. So further management of the third stage of labour includes management of the umbilical cord and delivery of the placenta. So while it is still attached to the baby, it is not cut immediately. Our guidelines state between 3 and 5 minutes it can be cut. However, you can also wait and palpate a pulse on the umbilical cord, and if pulse is not felt, then that is a good indication that it's ready to be cut. Now, so to sever the umbilical cord, we have clamps that need to be applied at 4, 6 and 8 inch intervals from the baby, and these will be clamped down over the umbilical cord like so, and cutting of the umbilical cord is such that 2 of the clamps stay with the baby and 1 stays with the mother. Now, delivery of the placenta is an important management following the delivery of the baby. This is pretty basic, but the important thing to remember is that no traction or pulling on the umbilical cord should be done in any circumstances, as this can promote an uneven breakage away from the uterine wall, which is really causing a significant risk of uterine rupture, also uterine hemorrhage, which is associated with very poor outcomes. So with the cord cut and the oxytocin flowing through the mother's body, the reduction in size of the uterus and thus the separation from the uterine wall will occur, and delivery of the placenta is usually quite straightforward. This should be placed in a bag and then taken up to hospital and examined for yourself for any obvious signs of clotting or hemorrhage, and the mother needs to be observed as well for signs of hemorrhage. Okay, so today we've just gone through a few manoeuvres associated with shoulder dystocia. It is a very rare obstetrics emergency, but the reason I believe that we do get taught it and that it is important to learn is that with proper management you can greatly improve both the outcome for the baby, whether it be successful or unsuccessful in terms of life, but also long-term outcomes like neurological and also traumatic outcomes. So I hope this has been somewhat informative.